I think one of the first things to have to get a handle on when we're talking about meditation and mindfulness practices is how to navigate these random thoughts that come through the mind, these random emotions and images. Most people I talk to and have trained say that that's usually what really frustrates them. And I know it frustrated me too quite a bit. As I close my eyes, I'm trying to meditate, I'm trying to focus on something, my breath, let's say, and oh God, just everything that happened in the day just zipping through my head. And what do I do with that? And folks have this misunderstanding about how to navigate those thoughts. They think they're supposed to empty their mind. Somewhere they've learned that. And they're supposed to have nothing up there, what have you. In reality, we can't empty our mind. As long as you're alive, you're going to have thoughts and desires. You're going to have the brain is going to operate. What we're trying to do with these mindfulness practices, these meditations, is learning how to navigate these thoughts that come through, these emotions that come through. We're not eliminating them. What we're doing is learning to shift our focus, not attach to them, not get drawn into their drama. Okay, and so one of the easiest exercises and preliminary exercise I give people is I just use this finger focus, this visual focus analogy. So if I were to bring my finger out front here, and I'm going to say visually, I want you to focus your attention on the finger. Bring your finger into a range where you can comfortably focus on that finger. Now, I am aware of the background. But the background, because it's not my focal point, it's a little fuzzy, it's a little blurry. I'm aware it's there, but my attention is completely on the finger. Now, that finger could represent anything we've chosen to meditate on or to focus our attention to. For instance, the breath, in a breath-focused meditation or a mindfulness meditation. Now, if that background actually represents also, in this analogy, our random thoughts. Okay, so here I am focusing on my breath, and all of a sudden a thought comes through that's coming through the background, and it draws my attention away. So now I'm taking my focus from the finger to the background, that random thought. What happens to the finger, which is representing the breath? What happens? Well, the finger's fuzzy. I kind of lose it. It becomes invisible or double or what have you. It's distorted. All I need to do is simply shift my focus back to the finger. Now, I can do this visually pretty quickly. The camera lens does a very similar thing. What we're doing with our visual focus here, shifting to the background, shifting back to the finger, is simply what we do with the mind. As I'm focusing on my breath in a mindful breathing exercise, all of a sudden a random thought comes through, draws my attention away. What do I do with that? I simply draw my focus back to the breath. This is the practice. It's a practice. It gets better, easier over time. I get drawn away, get distracted, I come back to the breath. Come back to the breath. It's kind of like a kid trying to just come back, trying to cross the street. Nope, just come back here, gently bring him back, not getting frustrated, not getting angry, accepting that this is normal and natural to have to train your mind to focus. So this is the nature of mindfulness practices. It's one of those very potent tools in the P.A.T.H toolbox, or action-taking toolbox. Mindfulness, well, maybe to define mindful, what does mindful mean? What does mindfulness mean? The definition I prefer is relaxed and alert, where we're relaxed, meaning we're not reacting, we're not reactive, we're not tense, we're simply allowing ourselves to focus. And alert means we're not numbed out, we're not blissed out. We are hyper aware of what's going on in the moment. The advantage of mindfulness practices, there's a number of things they do for us. First of all, they bring us into the present moment. They also help us become less reactive. And I'll talk about how we would leverage this practice. But primarily speaking, mindfulness practices, the way I like to use them, are day-to-day things we do, things we normally do in our day. It could be washing a dish, it could be walking, it could be brushing your teeth, it could be eating. And being able to take a daily activity that you're doing anyway, or the breath. Breath is a great one. And just use that as a focal point for your mind. Oh, so I'm going to be breathing. I can breathe normally, naturally throughout the day. And I said, I want to leverage the breath to a mindfulness practice. I can stop, draw my awareness inward, and then draw my focus just to the feeling of the breath, for instance. Now I've taken an automatic function of the body and I've leveraged it into a focal point for a mindfulness meditation. It's then detaching me from all the mental activity. It's detaching me from the activity of what's going around me, and it's bringing me into the present moment. That practice is taking me away from future thinking, past thinking. These are places where stress can definitely have play. It also can be used, these mindfulness practices can be used as a wedge between stimulus and response. So for instance, let's go back to the breath for a second as a mindfulness practice. Someone who has cravings, someone who, let's say, a cigarette or having a drink, I start to get stressed. I start to find myself in a scenario where I'm getting agitated. And my normal pattern of behavior is to do what? Pick up a cigarette, let's say. Well, instead of picking up the cigarette as my normal response, I could drop into a mindfulness practice. I can just focus on my breath. I could do another behavior. I could go take a walk, bringing my focus in, and not just walking, but walking with the intention of leveraging into a mindfulness meditation. When we're choosing day-to-day activities as mindfulness practices, especially in the beginning, it's more effective to find things that we're doing that I say have fewer moving parts, that are very simple physical movement. For instance, brushing your teeth. It's a simple back and forth movement. Or washing your body or washing a dish. Things that are not overly complicated physically. The other really wonderful thing about these mindfulness practices that makes them very potent is we are engaging the body. We're engaging the body, not just sitting there in a still, upright, formal position where every little scratch and itch and little tweak of the body gets our attention, but we're engaging the body. We're entertaining it. We're giving it acknowledgement. We're dispersing some of that physical energy that would maybe built up. And we're simply using the physical activity as our focal point. Just bringing my attention back to the movement of that toothbrush. My mind wants to go off reservation, just come back to the feeling of the brush on my teeth and the movement back and forth. Very simple things to do.
It sounds silly.
It sounds a little silly at first, maybe, because it's like all I'm doing is paying attention to brushing my teeth. But let's look at this for a second. If I can train myself to focus just on brushing my teeth, not multitasking my mind into 100 different things, but just brushing my teeth. Now, I may not need that much attention to brushing my teeth to do it well. But if I've trained myself to bring my focus right there, first of all, what I've done is I'm not running off thinking about my day to come or the argument I had with my wife the night before. I'm not allowing this stressful thoughts and patterns to come up in my mind. I'm actually using this toothbrush exercise as a way of calming myself, of relaxing myself, putting myself in the moment. So it has a de-stressing effect right off the bat. Second of all, I'm also training my mind to focus and detach, focus and refocus. That's very powerful. Think about something that you really need to get done. Let's say something in your job, and you need to bring your attention to a task. As you've trained yourself washing a dish or brushing your teeth or even breathing, learning to train and focus your mind to be in the moment on task, you can leverage that skill, that ability to focus to other things in your life where you're going to be more effective, more capable, more potent. So that has it's a very potent mind training exercise as well. Primarily, we also use it as I mentioned earlier, cravings. For folks who that addictive or that craving mind, that compulsive mind, there's a very potent practices for the compulsive mind. I compulsively want to I'm not going to just clean the bedroom. I'm going to clean the whole house, the garage, and I'm going to manicure the yard. I can't just stop at one thing. Or I'm not going to just have one drink. I'm going to end up having 10 or whatever it is, that compulsive behavior. We can use a mindfulness practice at the moment to interdict, to be that wedge between stimulus and response in a compulsive behavior pattern. I want to have that. I want to, I just do this room, just vacuum that carpet, just clean those windows. Can I just do that and be really right there doing it? So these practices are very powerful. In fact, the other part is they're very powerful too because they're always accessible to us. You don't have to have if you don't have time for a formal meditation practice. Doug, I don't have a room. I don't have a space to sit and cross-legged and do this meditation. You can do this throughout the day. Pick and choose your times, pick and choose your activities. You're going to breathe anyway. You're going to brush your teeth anyway. You're going to take a shower anyway. Oh, I can do this. I can actually just bring my focus here and turn this into a practice. Now, one of the reasons I like using the breath as one of the primary mindfulness practice exercises in the beginning is, first of all, it's a common denominator. We're all breathing. Everyone's breathing. It's the only system in the body that it can be totally voluntary or involuntary. So we can take control of the breath. When we take control of the breath, and when we use it as in a diaphragmatic breath especially, we've got a number of things happening. First of all, the breath, there's a lot of physical sensation. I can focus on just the feeling of the breath coming in and coming out. That could be my focus. One of my favorites comes from use of the breath as a mindfulness practice, comes from the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. And I read in one of his books about this stoplight breathing, where it says you're driving along and you come to a stoplight, not a stop sign, but a stoplight. And turn off the music, or if you're having a conversation, pause the conversation, and just for the duration of the stoplight, you drop into just a breath focus, mindful breath work. And you're pausing, you're stopping, you're focusing, and you're leveraging the breath in all those different ways we just discussed. Another way that these mindfulness practices can unfold is in a way with a little more dimension. Mindfulness in speech, for instance, again, as an interdiction for compulsive or reactive behavior. And that used to be me. I used to have the sharp tongue, the sharp comeback all the time. And when someone says something to you, for instance, or you're feeling compelled to blurt something out, it's probably going to be caustic or inflammatory, just pause and ask yourself those 3 questions. Some of you may be familiar with this. Okay, is what I'm about to say going to cause harm? Is what I'm about to say, to the best of my knowledge, true? And lastly, does it need to be said? Or at least, does it need to be said by me now? Now, if you take long enough to do that, you've already put a wedge between stimulus and response. Okay. And if you do feel like you need to say something, then you've done it in a responding fashion, not a reactive fashion. Now, I take that same template and I apply it to mindful eating. So, for instance, I tell folks if you can use eating something, a meal, let's just say if it's a meal, or even just one item of the meal, just one component, and ask yourself 3 questions along those same lines. Looking at the food in front of you, is this going to cause me harm? Do I have, some greasy, fast food in front of me? Is this going to cause me harm? Is this real? Meaning, I guess in this case, is it true? Is it real food? Is it close to real food as I can understand? And lastly, why am I eating this? So many times we're just eating compulsively. We're eating mindlessly. And a lot of times this is a big obstacle in us trying to lose weight or trying to change into some healthy habits. What I found with that is I've had a lot of success with folks changing their eating habits by just doing that. I'm not asking them to judge themselves. I said, if you ask those 3 questions and eat the meal if you want to. But over time, you keep asking the question, eventually you're going to change your behavior. Most people do. Okay. So there's a little more of it's got a little bit more moving parts. It's a little more complicated use of a mindfulness practice. But again, seeing the efficacy of building that wedge between stimulus and response instead of just digging into the food and talking or turning on the TV and all of a sudden you're three frozen pizzas down and you don't know where they went. If it's truly a mindfulness practice, if it's really being a mindful practice, it's going to probably be less likely to evolve or devolve into an obsessive behavior. Okay, because if it's obsessive behavior, it's really not mindful. It may look mechanically from the outside, well, I'm just brushing my teeth, but what the mind's doing, the mind is not building a wedge between stimulus and response. The stimulus and the response are involved in the brushing of the teeth. So one could confuse in their mind, or it could excuse a behavior in the mind. So, oh, I'm in a mindfulness practice, when in reality it's obsessive. This is why you have to be careful and how you choose the practice. If you obsessively can brush your teeth into where the dentist is telling you the enamel's coming off, maybe you leveraging another type of activity for mindfulness practice might be better. That might not be yours. You've got a pattern established there that we might want to work on. Mindfulness practices are good for everyone. I think we all can benefit for taking some activity in our day and just pausing to focus on what we're doing. Focus on the breath. That mindful breathing is actually the first, it comes right out of it's in the first step of the path. When we pause and we drop into an inner focus, the first thing we're doing is mindfully noticing our breath. We start to get clarity. We start to bring our focus to this place. We start to let everything else melt into the background. It's still there, but we're not paying attention to it as much. The purpose of a mindfulness practice is not just to occupy your mind with something else. It's to stop or slow down the wave after wave of thoughts and bring your attention, your focus, first to just one thing, one simple thing. Not the preamble to the Constitution, but just to the breath, just to a visual focus, a finger, whatever, something very simple, something that is not going to generate more thoughts. Thoughts tend to generate more thoughts, and they expand exponentially. We want, in a mindfulness practice, to focus on something that the mind, the outer mind, the intellect, is not going to have a heyday with and run to. A video game, even even a picture, especially if it's like a religious icon or word, these kinds of things can give the mind rabbit trails to go down, and we can get lost in those rabbit trails. And I'm really not in a mindfulness practice. Now I'm on a ramble. Video game looks, yeah, you can be very absorbed in the video game to the exclusion of anything happening around you. But you're now down various rabbit trails with what you're trying to do in the game. You're not hyper aware. You're not hyper conscious of what's going on with you. That's what we're looking to do, is not stop the flow of thoughts and emotions. Put them in the background. First, train us to focus on one thing as best we can, one thing. From there, we're able to drop into that awareness, the consciousness of the self, the objective observer. This is really the total of all these practices. Remember, all of these practices are simply different ways of allowing us, training us, giving us this range of motion to step back into that place of consciousness of the observer and observe ourselves. Not to entertain the mind in another direction, but to detach from those thoughts, detach from the workings of the intellect, and let our consciousness, our objective observer, take over. A mindful practice is not identified by what it looks like to the outside, but what is the practitioner doing on the inside? I can't look at you and say you're doing a mindfulness practice. You could be sitting like a statue in some lotus position with your eyes at half mast and incense burning, and I say, oh my gosh, he's in a mindfulness practice. He's deep in meditation. You could be off just reviewing pornography that you watched earlier, as far as I know. It's not what it looks like to the outside, it's what's going on the inside. How is that practitioner leveraging their moment? Where is their focus? Where is their attention? Does that make sense? The nice thing about a mindfulness practice is that you can be doing the practice and no one needs to know. You can be anywhere, anytime, taking every little opportunity to simply shift your focus. It's not always changing what you're doing, it's changing your focus on what you're doing. I can be sewing. You talked about your sister sewing. She may be sewing. Let's say she's doing it by hand. And she can be totally in the movement of that thread and needle, 100% focused on the action, the movement of her hand. Or she could be sewing and just thinking about the conversation she had with her mother earlier today and how angry she is. One's a mindfulness practice and one's not. The action hasn't changed. It's how did you leverage the action to train your mind to focus? The mind is going to wander. This is our nature in the beginning. The mind doesn't like to focus. The mind, it's been likened to the monkey mind, and we've heard these expressions. It's a monkey mind. It's all over the place. The thoughts want to bounce around like a pinball. They want to attach and make connections and do all these things. We're simply training our focus to be on something other than those thoughts. The thoughts will pass by. You're not eliminating them. I'm trying to focus on one thing. I'm going to get distracted. I get distracted. I find I'm distracted. I gently bring myself back. I'm consistently working on bringing myself back. The more consistently that we can focus on that one thing that we've chosen, with fewer and fewer lapses, is actually bringing us into a state of meditation. Meditation is a state of consciousness, a state of awareness, hyper awareness.